Hey, what's going on, people? It's your boy JK Van. How are you today? Hope that everyone is having an awesome, amazing afternoon. If you will, go ahead and share this broadcast with me as you were coming in on all of our social media channels. Thank you to those that are joining via Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Live. Going to have a conversation with you about the effects of grief and what that means to us here in 2025. So, once again, go ahead and share this broadcast for me, please. Repost it in your stories, drop it in the comments. You can even share the link as a direct text message to those that need it. But I think there's a necessary conversation for us to have on today. So I hope that everyone is having a great afternoon so far. Thank you, thank you, thank you for tuning in with us to Conversations That Heal. This is the first one that we're doing for the year 2025, but I believe there's some amazing things that we're going to uncover in our time of sharing on today. So I'm not going to delay. We're going to go ahead and jump into this. And I want to start by sharing a little portion of my history and my experience with the effects of grief. So, February the 23rd, 2006 was a defining moment for me. And what happened on this particular day, it started like any other typical day for a high school sophomore. You get up and get dressed and go to school. For a little background and context, my parents um, were working class people. My father owned a funeral home and he was a captain with Subject County Fire Department. My mother worked in management with Boeing. So, normal day, get up, they go to work, I go to school. On this particular day, my dad was finishing his shift at the fire department. So on the 2 days that he was off from Sedgwick County, he would work at the funeral home. So I talked to him that morning, probably around 7:30. We had our usual conversation, all that good stuff. Went on to school, and that day we were actually in a competition for our school newspaper. So we had left, went up to Emporia, Kansas, did what we had to, and came back. By the time that we got back to the school, it was probably 3:30 or 4 o'clock. Time for me to go home. So I called my dad. He didn't answer the phone, which was kind of not necessarily unusual. Probably figured he was meeting with the family or doing something at the funeral home because he was getting ready to open a new location on that following day, which would have been Friday, the 24th. So I get home, called him again. He didn't answer. Called his secretary. She said that she hadn't heard from him in a couple of hours. So I left and went by the funeral home just to check things out, see if he was there, and he wasn't. Again, didn't think anything of it. Went back home, started to rearrange furniture in my bedroom, was just kind of wasting time for a little while, just doing different things. And probably around 8 o'clock or so, still hadn't heard from my dad. Now, he was the kind of guy that would call you just to ask you, like, hey, are you good? You okay? Have you eaten anything? Do you need anything? What's your plan for the evening? Quick 5, 7 minute conversation. He was good till he saw you later on that evening. But it was just unusual that I hadn't heard from him around that time. Called a couple of his other friends just to see if they had seen him or heard from him, and they hadn't either. So I'm like, okay, something's just up. So I get in my car again, drive to the funeral home, and he was not there. So I left from the funeral home and drove to our family's church, which was where he was housing his business at the time. And what we came to find out is that he was there. His car was parked in the church parking lot. And when I got out of his car or out of my car, I walked around because I parked on the right side of his car. I got out, walked around, and my father was laying dead in the parking lot, face down, pool of blood all around him. By the time that I had got close up to him to kind of inspect what was going on, is when the police officers were pulling up into the parking lot. Someone had called them just a couple minutes prior, and they had arrived there around the same time that I got to the church. So what do you say to a 16-year-old that literally found his father laying dead in a parking lot? Well, thus begins my story with grief and trauma. Now, go on from there. I was the one that found him. So, of course, police have reason to question me. They took me down to, actually, they put me in the back of a cop car, and I just sat there for what seemed like 2 or 3 hours. And it's not really registering in my mind that he's gone. Because I'm still thinking that, EMS is going to pull up, they're going to administer care to him, get him to the hospital, all will be well. Well, that wasn't the case. He just laid there and he laid there and he laid there. No life sign, no movement, no anything. They took me to the police station and questioned me for another 2, 3, 4 hours, however long it was, before they let my mother come into the room, um, into the interview room to get me. And when she did, the only thing that she could do is just hold me, just grab me and try to console me. And I wasn't crying or anything because it still just hadn't registered that this is what is going on. Hadn't really set up in my mind or in my heart that I'm literally standing in the most traumatic moment that I've ever lived through in my 16 years of life. We left there, went to my grandparents' home. The rest of our family had gathered there. And, you kind of just begin to go through the motions. Now, I say that because my father owned his funeral home for multiple years. So I grew up in that industry. I was around death from the time I was 2 years old, probably, maybe even 2 months, whoever knows. So you kind of become accustomed to how this experience works. You learn the motions of it, all that good stuff. So, I'm going in the house trying to comfort my family, and they're all trying to comfort me. And it just became this really weird, awkward moment because in my mind, it's still not registering that he's actually gone. Okay, my brothers and I, we plan his service, all that good stuff, pick his clothes out, his casket, all that. We get to the day of his funeral, which was a Saturday morning. And it wasn't until they opened the doors of this church and there were literally thousands of people in this room, in this sanctuary of this church. And we began to walk down the middle aisle into my father's funeral. That's when reality set in. Like, wait a minute. Okay, there is no undoing of this. There is no backing away from this. This is reality. Still hadn't quite wrapped my mind around the severity of the situation until weeks later. What happened is I came home from school one day and I was used to seeing my dad at home. He wasn't there, and that bothered me. Went in the house with my mom. She was on the phone talking to one of her friends. I went up to her and gave her a hug. But this time when I hugged her, I literally collapsed onto her, literally fell on top of my mother and just began to weep uncontrollably. Couldn't stop me from crying for at least a solid hour. And that is the moment when I finally realized he's not coming back. There is no more working alongside him. There are no more moments of barbecue ribs and crab legs. Weird combination, but that was his favorite. There were no more days spent at the fire station with the fire family. There's no more of that. There's no more driving his car to Kansas City to go see my nephew, go see my brother. It's none of that. No more experiences of his grandchildren coming to the house, calling out Paul's name, going to play with them. All of that is over. How do you rationalize that to a 16-year-old? How do you explain that type of newfound reality that is so very stark from what you're accustomed to? How do you explain that? How do you walk a 16-year-old into that kind of understanding, into this new reality that you are forced into? It's not something that you would have welcomed on yourself. It's not something that you would have ever imagined. Like we never would have fathomed that this would have happened. You couldn't have prepared any of us for that. Couple of reasons. Number one, my daddy's like a strong guy. He's the one that's known for carrying other people, both as a fireman and an EMT, but also in his other career as a funeral director. He's the one that's known for walking people through these traumatic moments. and helping them to navigate and make sense of these new realities that they are seated in. Well, this was different because all of that is over. There's no more of that. And somehow I had to go back into reality, into my everyday world, and continue to live on. Well, the problem is I didn't have good grieving methods because by default I was conditioned to being of service and aid to other people, just as I had seen my father and my mother do for years. So it's kind of like part of me entered into autopilot for a moment. Part of me was still confused as to how do I navigate, what do I do? That was sophomore year. Senior year comes, graduate high school. My granddaddy dies, which is my paternal grandfather. He dies in May. And then my maternal grandfather, we called him Paw, he dies in June. So arguably within a 2.5 year span, the three men that are closest to me are all gone. All of them gone. And if you know anything about me, I love older people. I absolutely love my grandparents. Spent all my time as a young boy in Oklahoma with my pawpaw, in Kansas where I grew up. I spent all of every weekend almost with my grandma and granddaddy. If I wasn't with them, I was with my grandma Billy, which is my maternal grandmother. I was always around my grandparents. And so now to have my father gone, as well as granddaddy and pawpaw, I don't know how to deal with this. It's too many absences of important people that are everyday figures, they're prominent people, consistent pictures, consistent engagement, gone. Well, I went off to college, went a little crazy, got involved in all kinds of nonsense, drinking, parties, everything, while trying to go to school and maintain a good GPA. And there came a point when it all just came to a head. And I found myself in these moments of just anger. Now, for context, my father was stabbed 28 times in his body. And when we had to go into the church to clean it up, even those that were helping to assist with that process, it was just so traumatic for them because there was so much blood everywhere. And I don't mean to be gory, but I need to really set the scene for this. Even the people that were responsible for cleaning up the church and kind of restoring it to its original condition, they too had trouble because of the tragic nature of all of this. What I realized is that his death not only affected me and those in my family, but several others that were a part of our village and our extended family. I'm a 90s kid, so I grew up in the day of it takes a village to raise a child. So I had several adopted aunties and uncles and cousins and all that good stuff that were around me. And everybody is just grappling with this newfound reality that the one person that you knew was just always going to be there, no matter what, is never coming back. So I found myself in this place of anger because there was no explanation as to why he died. We didn't know the circumstances surrounding his death. But the one thing that we knew is that he was never coming back. So that started me on this whole journey and conquest of trying to find healing, trying to make sense of this reality, and somehow continue on with my life. When I got to college, I literally went crazy. Had to leave the school that I was enrolled in, moved to another city about an hour away, and thought, let me just try and start another life here in a new place. Well, that didn't work either, because the same person was carrying the same condition into a new environment. The reality is, if you don't change you, or you don't change your nature, if you don't change the things that are happening to you, you're just going to take those same problems into another environment. And the cycle's only going to repeat itself. And that's exactly what happened in 3 separate locations across 2 time zones. Move from this place to that place, from that place to another place in the same exact condition, which is that I was angry. I wanted my daddy back. But I'm learning to live with this reality called he's not coming back. So here I am, about 28 years old. Grief had moved me into such a destructive place that my body, my physical health was now affected because I did not grieve my daddy's death properly. Along with him, didn't grieve my pawpaw or my granddaddy. Then in 2012, my grandmama goes home. My grandma Billy. That was now people that know me know I love to cook. That's the one that really taught me how to cook. Like her dressing, my dressing is her recipe. Like she taught me everything I know. She's gone. So grief is then compounded by more loss and more loss and more loss. But I'm still in the same mental and emotional space that I've been in for these last, at that time, 8, 9 years or so. Hurting, angry, trying to find relief, but can't find it. So if you can't find relief, what you'll inevitably discover is an escape that either becomes drugs, alcohol, gambling, all of these destructive habits that don't speak life to you and doesn't help you to displace or to offload the effects of what you are living through. So it's inevitable that the same cycle just continued and continued and continued until I made the decision one day that I cannot continue to live like this. It's literally going to destroy me, if not kill me. I finally got some help. Finally decided to reach out, surround myself with wise counsel, surround myself with people that could speak life to me and to help me make sense of what I was dealing with that I didn't have language for. I said all that because I want you to see this, that the perspective that I'm speaking from today is from lived experience. And when I look around the world as we know it, there are so many people all around that are dealing with heavy, copious amounts, levels, layers of grief. People have dealt with some seriously traumatic events, whether it be someone's natural death, whether it be, the ending of a relationship, a separation. People grieve over the loss of jobs or missed moments, missed encounters and experiences. I want to give you a couple definitions real quick. Grief, by definition, is a deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death. But trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. So what's the correlation between grief and trauma? Trauma is the occasion, the event itself, but grief is the result of trauma. Traumatic moments happen in an instant. However, grief, which is a response to trauma, is a prolonged event that does not have an expiration date. Contrary to popular belief, in American culture, we love to tell people that time heals all wounds, but I want to challenge that because that's not true. There are some wounds that time doesn't heal, meaning the effects of just don't magically disappear because time has elapsed. But what I will offer to you is this thought. Time doesn't heal the wound, but it teaches you how to live with it. That I can say from experience. Time doesn't alleviate the experience of having to somehow grapple between reality and experience. It doesn't exempt you from that. But what time does is it offers you several moments that become defining and teaching moments for you that help you to better understand how to navigate your life in response to what you have lived through. Now, let's look at this thought called trauma for just a couple minutes. We stated just a moment ago that it's a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. Now, disturb is a compound word. Disturb, dis meaning complete, and that suffix turb, it originates from this word turbane, which means to disorder. So a disturbance is complete disorder of peace. Distress, which is a part of traumatic experience. Distress is a Latin word. It means to draw apart. So anything that causes you distress seeks to divide you or to draw you or pull you away from what once was considered peaceful. And if it is a disturbance, it is a complete disorder. Now, we as people, we like stuff to be in sequential order for it to make sense, if you will. Well, how do you live in this reality where nothing around you makes sense? Everything is out of array. There is no order to none of this. There's a tearing away of your person from what once was considered a peaceful place. Here's the reality. It does not matter what kind of traumatic experience that you have been subjected to. The response of trauma is always going to be grief. Because there's a part of me that has to be reconciled around these newfound experiences that I've been subjected to. The dilemma that we face in the days that we are in now is that very many people don't know how to deal with grief. Many people don't know how to deal with traumatic moments and traumatic experiences. But I want to offer this to you, that trauma oftentimes is exacerbated by grief. And what that simply means is that grief has this ability to prolong the effects of trauma. So traumatic moments and traumatic experiences could be a moment that spans 1 minute, 60 seconds. Could be something that spans 1 month or 1 year. However long, the effect is still the same. That something external has occurred to your person that internally distresses you and it disturbs you. Something, no matter what that is, has occurred that has caused you great distress and great disturbance. So the event itself has the ability to tear away at parts of you that should be regarded as peaceful. And it has permission to do that until you begin to address it. Yeah, I know that's not something that you're going to hear from most people, but I'm going to tell you the truth because I am so concerned with the state that people are living in now because they don't have healthy grieving mechanisms. They don't have healthy measures that help them to offload the effects of trauma. And so when we don't get that stuff off of us, when we don't find ways to cast it away from us, it sets up internally. And whatever you give time and permission to, that thing then has the ability to study you. Yeah. It has the ability to decode you and to teach you how you should respond. does not offer you the ability to make that kind of decision for yourself. It literally begins to teach you. And it will teach you all kinds of destructive, harmful habits in response to what you have lived through that you may not feel like you have the strength or the ability or the wherewithal to cast off and to throw far away from you. So grief can prolong the effects of trauma, because when trauma happens, that picture, those emotions, those thoughts and feelings, all that stuff, it sets up in your mind, and the mind has the ability to compartmentalize that thing. So however long it was that this experience occurred, it sets up in your mind. Have you ever noticed how when certain days, certain dates, certain moments come around, you find yourself just not being at peace? You find yourself disturbed a little bit. Or when you go into certain environments, you encounter certain smells, certain scents that remind you of someone or remind you of that place, that thing, and it just begins to bother you and mess with you a little bit. It's because the traumatic moment, the traumatic experience itself has locked up in your mind, and it has begun to define that moment for you. It teaches you what to think. It teaches you how to respond. And so if you don't find ways to address that and to deal with it, it then becomes a part of your persona. It becomes a part of your personality, a part of your makeup. It's a part of who you are. You'll find yourself being angry at people that have absolutely nothing to do with the reason for your anger. And we run the risk of subjecting innocent people to our unhealed trauma, our unhealed experiences. We will make people victims of the consequence that they are not justifiably responsible for. I can't tell you the number of times when people would just, I mean, from a very, very, very innocent place, would just say kind things to me, very nice things to me, try to do nice things for me. And I would interpret that from the lens of my traumatic experience, which taught me I can't trust anybody. It taught me you always got to wait for people to pull the okie doke. Don't let them too close to you. Don't give them access to your heart. Don't give them access to your space. Just wait for it. Wait for that moment to come when you're going to see their real motives. It's because my trauma began to teach me that everybody around me has some kind of ulterior motive. That's not true. Some people genuinely have the purest of intentions with regard to you. But because you've been discipled or you've been taught to always live in defense, your heart and your mind won't have the capacity to see that they really are approaching you from a genuine place. Even wise counselors, strong men that felt the need to just, grab me up and pull me close to them and just love on me. Try and give me some sense of stability. I would reject them because I was angry at the death of my daddy that still didn't have answers. I was angry, bitter with the world because the death of my daddy and the experiences that his death taught me. I'll never forget one of my daddy's close friends, his good friends, Uncle Doug. It was one of the years after my dad had passed away. Long story short, I'll cut across. Uncle Doug grabbed me and just literally like bare. Now, if you know him, he a big dude. He's 6'3", like 280 pounds. He a big guy. My Uncle Doug grabbed me, pulled me close to him, and just hugged me like I was his own son. That was a defining moment for me because I had to make a decision right then. Are you going to willfully receive what you know that your heart and your life needs? Or are you going to repeat the same cycle that is destructive in nature, where you reject the purest of love and people with the purest of intentions? And that was the beginning of this whole journey of healing for me. It started within the context of the village that was around me. Those that had watched me grow up from little boy. People that I knew and I trusted. See, it's something about the heart that reaches the heart. You'll know the healthy parts of you, the healthy and reconciled parts of you will know when there's something genuine coming from a heart that's trying to reach your heart. But you have the responsibility to make a decision whether you'll receive it or reject it. It's totally up to you. The problem with trauma is that it teaches us how to respond. It teaches us how to live. What it also does is it taunts us and it torments us. Because until you offload that thing, it will constantly have permission and access to your mind. It'll have access to your psyche. And so those same images and those same pictures, they will continue to reoccur in your mind. They'll play in your subconscious. Your dreams will be disturbed. Even open visions that you have, moments where you would call yourself daydreaming, they'll still continue to taunt you and to harm you until you come into a place where you make a decision about how you're going to respond to this. Time doesn't heal the wound, but time will give you another definition, and it'll teach you how to deal with and live in this newfound reality. We find ourselves in this place where the experience, the emotions, all that good stuff is reoccurring, and we desperately want to get away from it. But what I'm seeing and noticing everywhere is that most people don't have the fortitude to make a decision about how they're going to respond to grief and trauma. Time is going to continue. Annual dates, occurrences, and events, they're going to come. This is why I chose to come here on this day. Every year, February 23rd, I'm invited into a space where I have to make a decision. What are you going to do this year? You going to lay in bed and wallow all day, or you going to get up and do something? Are you going to allow for the fact that you miss your daddy? You're going to allow that thing to disrupt your day, or you're going to get up and do something about it? Every year, February 23rd, I come back to this same place. Here's the thing, because a boy will never not miss his dad. That's one thing I can give you emphatically. There will never be a moment in which I will not miss my daddy. There will never be a moment, as long as I live, in which I will not wonder, what would life be like if he were here? What would I be doing now if he were here? What kind of businesses and empires would we have built by now if he were still living? There's a part of you that will never escape this place called wondering what if. But when you come to this place called what if, that's another moment that you are invited to make a decision. What if it's about possibility? What if it's a compare and a contrast of differences in reality? And whenever you find yourself at this place called what if, you've got to make a decision. Now, let me submit this to you. One of the strategies that I learned for dealing with trauma and grief is to assign another definition to what this means to me. What does that mean in practicality? Okay, well, his death could either symbolize the end of life, the beginnings of trauma. It could also symbolize death and fear of starting a family, getting married, owning a business, college degree, whatever. Because that's what the experience taught me about all this. That's what the experience itself told me that I should think and feel about all of this. But again, this what if moment came. And I had to finally make the decision to somehow find a way to just be okay with all of what has happened. I was invited into this space where I had to either choose to live with this and live beyond this, or to succumb to it and die. And I didn't even ask myself, what would your daddy want? What would your daddy think? We already know that. But in this moment, that's not relevant because he's gone. I can only imagine what I think that he would say, but that's not what's important right here. What is important is, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? Because I'm the person that's going to have to put forth the effort to make these thoughts a reality or not. And I'm not dismissing or trying to minimize what I believe would be the best intentions that my father would have had for me. However, he is not alive to make that known, man. That's what I tell myself. You can think what he probably would say, but there's no guarantee because he's not here to speak for himself. You can't speak for another person. But what you can do is live for them. Yeah, you can. It doesn't mean that you live up to their expectation and you live up to their ceiling. It means that you take all of their experience and you take all of their wisdom and all of their accomplishments and you build from it. You have to find a way to redefine what trauma has taught you to believe, and subsequently what trauma has taught me to confess as reality from my mouth. Can I either say, okay, I'm going to live in this place filled with all kinds of dis-ease and anger and all of that, or you can choose to do something different. And don't pressure yourself, because you may not know how to respond immediately. But the fact that you would even entertain that kind of a thought, entertain that kind of a conversation with yourself, says a whole lot more than what you think. I can guarantee you, as long as you are alive and you have breath in your body, you are going to come to this crossroads called what if. And when you come to this crossroad called what if, you've got to make a decision. And I will submit this to you, that the decision you make, let that be a redefining moment. The position that your heart takes, what your heart assumes, let that be a redefining moment. Re means to do again, to do over. Give yourself permission to do this over. Give yourself permission to think differently about this. I know I'm saying this from experience. It may not seem and or feel like you can immediately, but I promise you, with time, it becomes easier to entertain the question of what if. With time, it becomes easier. It's not something you got to know right now. No one is expecting that kind of perfection from you. See, our problem is we hold ourselves to certain standards that ain't nobody else done. I know improper English, and so what? We hold ourselves to these certain standards and say, I have to do this, 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 I have to do this. Well, could that be performance driven instead of emotionally based? Could that just be actions that we are portraying, actions that we are giving our life supply to because it seems right? Just because it seems right doesn't mean that it's healthy for me. Just because in that moment it feels like the sensible thing to do. It feels like the responsible response that I should have. But what I learned is that inadvertently could be killing me and I not know it. What I learned from experience, that thing, it could drive me to a place where I no longer have any kind of sanity. I have no grip over my emotions, my feelings. I have ruined relationships with good people because I chose not to deal with my trauma and my grief, and then subsequently subject people to all of this stuff going on in me, and then pour that on them because it's what felt right in the moment. It may feel natural, but it doesn't mean that that's a healthy response. It may feel commonplace to us, but it doesn't mean that that's the best response. So yeah, death, separation could have felt like this, but does it have to remain defined as this? One of the things that I did in time, it took me a while to get to this place. I picked up my pen, started to write. And this book, The Holistic Journey, is the beginnings of a series that I feel responsible for sharing with others because it's the story of my healing and the story of my recovery. I'm telling you, as someone that has literally lived through the worst of the worst. There's other things I could share with you that just kind of compounded that traumatic experience with my daddy's death. I've lived through the worst of it and have sought to make people pay for what I believe that they were responsible for. And I've also subjected people to undue and unjust consequences as a result of them trying to be kind and be nice to me. Again, there comes a point when you have to ask yourself a question called what if? What if this could actually provoke me to live instead of do things that look like death? What if I'm supposed to gain some wisdom or some knowledge that's going to help me 10, 15 years from now because of this, instead of defining this as something that broke me? It broke me, but it didn't break me. Deeply wounded and affected me, but does it have the ability to rob me of the impetus that I need to somehow rebuild and reconstruct life? And I want to submit this to you. You're still breathing. Means that there's still time and opportunity available. It's only when you close your eyes for the last time that the sum of your life and the sum of your story is sealed. You cannot go back in history and undo. You can't do that. But what you can do is live beyond that moment. What you can do is choose to enter into something that extends beyond the limitations and the grip of grief and trauma. So trauma happened, okay. But what then becomes your response to trauma? I'm grieving, okay. But what then becomes your response to grief? What is it that you can do to help navigate to a stable and a healthy place? What is it that you are able to do? Now, some people like to vacation. Some people like to go to the gym. Some people like to cook. Some people like art. Some people like to go to the playground, whatever. Some people sew. Some people are crafty. They journal. What can you do that serves as a source of strength? It helps to fuel life back to you. It helps to remind you of your value, remind you of your importance, all these other things. And here's the thing. It doesn't have to be anything that's, super big and just great. It's the small things that make the difference. It's the small, minute, minuscule things that we may give second thought to or dismiss them as fleeting thoughts in the mind. But if that thing can pull you away from this deep sunken place that you may be in temporarily, maybe you should give a little bit more of your time and energy to that. See, the tendency for most is to just give in and pull their mind away from. They check out mentally, check out emotionally. They live under such strain, live under such stress that even normal, even the idea of healthy is so far from their mind. But as long as you are breathing, as long as you are standing on top of dirt, time and opportunity are still available to you. And I will forever tell people this until I die. You will always be presented with these moments called what if. It's the whole point of me coming on here today is to tell people when those what if comes, choose different. We get reality. I'm not dismissing that or discounting it. We get it. Baby, I'm 35 years old and there are still some days when I sit and cry. This is one thing I also learned about grief. You can grieve the person, but you can also grieve the possibility. Yeah. You can grieve the individual, but you can also grieve the possibility. Because here's the reality for me. My daddy didn't get to watch me win a state track meet. He didn't get to come to my graduation. He didn't get to send me off to college. When I get married, he won't be there. I have children, he'll never meet them. And these are things that I feel like should happen. These are life experiences and life moments that I would want to share with both of my parents, not just one of them. But the fact is, some experiences I'll never have. And I've learned to be okay with that. Does it change my wish or my want? No. But do I get stuck there? No. Because I'm choosing not to live in a fantasy, but to live in reality. Time is going to continue to progress. Time is going to continue to lapse. Reality is always going to be present. So when you come to your what if crossroads, I'm asking you to stop for a moment. Look around you, take assessment of everything you can, and choose different. Make a different decision. Find another definition, a better definition that will help to pull you from this low place, bring you back up to surface. Think about depression. Depression is the result of prolonged grief. Yeah. Grief meaning deep sorrow that has time can become the gateway for depression. And when people fall into that depressed place, those thoughts are compounded on them. And it literally will not leave them alone until they choose to deal with it and to displace it. Every one of us is going to come to that place at one point or another, at least once or twice every year. But when it happens, what if? What if I'm able to live past this? What if I'm able to still have a good life even while this key prominent person is not here? So it doesn't matter where you are in your journey with grief, in your journey with offloading trauma. Don't stop wondering, what if? Now, I will give you the truth. When you enter into that place, you're going to find all kinds of other emotions that you either have maybe you were able to suppress them or able to avoid them entirely. You're going to come into contact with all kinds of thoughts and feelings, all this other stuff that you have never, ever, ever encountered before. You have never had those type of experiences before. Promise you. But when it does happen, I'm going to ask you to make a different decision. I'm going to ask you to look at this differently than what you have in times past. Because every year these dates and these moments are going to happen. There may be some days that are great, some days that are terrible. I've been there. I've been there. Some days when you're feeling emotionally stable, like you were able to just conquer the world and go out and, Superman some stuff. But then what happens in that instant when you smell something that reminds you of, or you hear a song that reminds you of? What happens in those spaces when those innocent but devastating reminders come around you? Those are moments where you have to engage with what if. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm telling you what I've lived through, man. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. But my concern for humanity is when those moments happen, we haven't built ourselves up enough to be able to make a different decision and to choose life. Given the condition of the world right now, all kinds of nonsense going on. So it's not something that you look external for. It's got to come from within. That decision to live is something that has to begin in your heart and in your mind, because the two are directly connected. Whenever those moments come, I'm telling you, it's going to happen. When they do come, That's when you make critical decisions about what you want to do, and then you figure out how you're going to do it. Don't sentence yourself to having to have a strategy in the moment. Mm-mm. You take each journey, take each day as it comes, take each moment as it arises. Some comes up, deal with it right then. Don't suppress that thing. That's a learned behavior that we've used for hundreds of years, and it doesn't work. At some point, there's got to be a confrontation. But don't confront that thing until you are ready. But don't make the mistake of not having the necessary confrontation. It's not external, it begins with you, it begins with self. It's not something that anyone can do for you. No, have a support system, have people around you that you know and trust, people that know you. So when you are having these off moments, you are having these off days, they'll be able to look at you or to hear the tremble in your voice, and they'll be able to step in and help you to navigate back to a safe, healthy place. See that it's small things like that. Being able to pick up the phone and either send a text message or call somebody or whatever when these moments do happen, as opposed to becoming a recluse and pushing the world out, and then I'm left to wallow in this place with all of my emotions that are just surging through me. Whenever these moments come, confront them head on. Whenever these emotions rise, confront them head on and make a different decision that's going to fuel life to you. If I can live, so can you. And I was angry. I mean, out for blood. Angry. Angry. But that anger is what almost destroyed me. That anger is what almost caused me to self-sabotage. I don't want that for you. I would that new and better things would happen to you. I guess my concern is I don't want people to make the same mistakes that I made and not be able to grieve in a healthy manner and in a way that doesn't rob you of the future that you rightfully deserve. That's why I'm on this journey. That's why I'm on this quest of being able to chronicle my steps and chronicle the necessary lessons and things that I've been able to extract since February 23rd, 2006. And yes, you can purchase this on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Again, Holistic Journey by J.K. Vann. Today for me is another defining moment. Because 19 years ago is when this whole experience began. So instead of me giving into emotions and thoughts and feelings, not dismissing them, but what I am choosing to do is to acknowledge them, but to respond differently. And the response this year is to come to you and share with you my experience, share with you a little bit of wisdom that I've gained and learned over the last 19 years that has helped me to be able to speak life to countless others. Because I don't want people to respond to grief and trauma with the same destructive response that I did. Because it literally almost cost me my sanity and cost me my life. So I love everybody. I love all of y'all. I want to show you something real quick. This is my daddy. If I can get this to work, technology does what it wants to do. Well, okay, that's not gonna show itself. Anyway, you follow me on social media. I'm gonna post a couple pictures of my mom and my daddy this evening, you'll see all of it. You'll see all of it. But as you journey in life, as you come to your crossroads moments and you come to this place called what if, just stop before you respond. Take assessment and then make the right response. That's what's going to jumpstart your journey toward healing, wholeness, stability, and peace. And if you need somebody to talk to, just to be a sounding board, reach out. I don't mind talking to people. I talk to strangers I ain't never met before, but we connect via social media or whatever we have to do. I don't mind extending myself as a resource to people because I know what it's like to live in this low place. I know what that's like, man. Oh God. I know what it's like to be there. But I will tell you this, you don't have to stay there. So as my name is Jonathan, you do not have to stay there. You can choose life. You can choose healing. You can choose wholeness. My name is J.K. Van. Love all of you. I hope that something that's been shared over this last hour gives you a little bit of courage, gives you a little bit of inspiration, gives you a little bit more hope, little fortitude, whatever it is that you need, so that you'll see and hear someone's experience. That if I can I'm gonna leave y'all with this. I remember the words, the title of the eulogy that my uncle preached at my daddy's funeral. I will never forget it. There is a hope that lives beyond tragedy. Years later, as an adult, that thing is true. There is always hope that lives beyond tragedy. Tragedy occurs in the moment, but life is going to continue. Hope is not relegated or defined by tragedy. It can be impacted for a moment, yeah, but it's not defined by tragedy. Hope will always live beyond tragedy. I can live, you can too. I love every one of y'all. I want everybody have an amazing evening. Thank you for joining me.